It's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories this morning. You haven't missed your chance. The top 4 priority groups urged to come forward for a COVID-19 jab as ministers make a final push to hit Monday's vaccine target. Senators could vote later in Donald Trump's second impeachment trial as his defence calls the proceedings an act of political hatred. COVID's addiction impact. Warnings the national lockdown is leading to a rise in families seeking help for people with alcohol and drug issues.
You just sort of can't see the end. I think it's the hopelessness of it, and there's not an end point.
We need a clear plan. Calls from the wedding industry for a route forward with 200,000 weddings still postponed from last year. In the sport, England's cricketers have made a strong start to the second test against India. We've got all the action from Chennai.
And it's time to say goodbye to the snow, but not just yet. It will be a little wintry over the weekend, but by Monday, some parts could be seeing temperatures in double figures.
And at 7:45, we'll take a look at the newspapers with the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha and the comedian Andrew Doyle. Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. A final push is underway to ensure everyone in the top 4 priority groups comes forward for a COVID-19 vaccine. The UK-wide target is to offer vaccines to 15 million people by Monday. People aged 70 and over, care home residents and staff, healthcare workers and the clinically extremely vulnerable. England and Wales have now met that target, and ministers are making a fresh bid to increase uptake and tackle misinformation in some groups. Becky Cotterill reports.
As vaccinators continue to battle the virus, the numbers are going in the right direction. The infection rate has shrunk to a level last seen in summer, and jab uptake has been extremely high among priority vulnerable groups. As the government looks to inoculate the over 65s, a fresh plea to anyone who is eligible but reluctant to join over 14 million people who've already been vaccinated.
If you're in one of those groups, what I'd say is please come forward if you haven't already got an appointment to be jabbed, because the more people who get this jab, the safer everybody is.
The messaging particularly targeted at BAME communities, who are more likely to become severely ill with COVID, but less likely to get a jab. At this clinic in northwest London, optimism and resignation.
I did my own research and I'm very satisfied with everything.
We all have to take care of each other, so they're telling us that it's safe, so we will.
I'm fine with it. It's one of those things I think I should get, but I'm not too sure whether it'll work or not.
Uptake for the vaccine has exceeded government expectations, but no one can afford to be complacent. A doctor here told me that they were in a race against time to protect this community. He says messaging from GPs and local healthcare providers is vital in continuing to build trust in the rollout, especially in the face of a mutating enemy. As surge testing for the South African variant begins in Middlesbrough, a direct message from the government to the most vulnerable. It is not too late to get a vaccine. Becky Cotterill, Sky News, North West London.
Well, our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us now from Westminster. And Rob, the vaccination programme moving ahead at pace. It's been very successful. But the Health Secretary this morning saying that we actually need to live with COVID-19 in the same way that we do with the flu.
Yeah, Matt Hancock's given an interview to the Daily Telegraph, which you can probably read in either an optimistic or a pessimistic way. I think the optimistic part of it is that Matt Hancock says that by the end of the year, COVID-19 should be a treatable disease and that vaccines and treatments mean that it'll be an illness we can live with like we do the flu. So I think an indication that this isn't going away, that the vaccination programme isn't just going to banish COVID-19 from all of our lives forever, but that going forward, how we manage it will change, that the vaccine programme will bring an end to the pandemic stage of COVID, how we've been experiencing it for the last year, but it may well come back and cause pressures for the NHS every winter like seasonal flu does. that treatments, which the UK has been at the forefront of discovering and trialling, will play a part as well, especially in those where the vaccine does not work. So that's the long term. In the short term, clearly the focus is on what this vaccine success means for the lifting of restrictions. And I think in both scientific and political circles, there is a good deal of optimism, probably mixed with a hefty dose of relief that cases are coming down, that the reproduction rate is below 1, the lowest since summer last year, that the epidemic is shrinking. The issue is we are coming down from a very high level of infections. You just look at the number of people in hospital with COVID-19, and it is still above the peak level it was at last April in the first wave peak. And that is why scientists are all urging caution when it comes to lifting restrictions. They are saying that this needs to be done gradually in a step-by-step basis, with government pausing after reopening certain sectors or taking certain measures to gauge the impact that has had on infection spread, and also warning that some lower down measures like face masks, like some social distancing, may be needed right through until winter. Now that might be too slow and too cautious for some here in Westminster.
OK, Rob, thank you. Let's take a look at the latest UK coronavirus figures now. 15,144 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 were recorded in the most recent 24-hour period. And a further 758 people have died within 28 days of testing positive, bringing the UK total to 116,287. So far, more than 14 million first doses of a vaccine have been administered. US senators could vote later today on whether to convict or acquit Donald Trump in his impeachment trial over last month's Capitol riots. The former president's lawyers have said Democrats are waging a campaign of hatred against him and say the language he used before the insurrection was ordinary political rhetoric. Adam Parsons reports from Washington, D.C.
Who was responsible for this? The attack on the US Capitol was vicious and shocking. This trial has given us new insights into the mayhem. The vice president and his family being rushed from a hiding place as the mob called for him to be hanged. Republican Senator Mitt Romney being told to run away. But was all this really caused by the words of one man? Democrats have alleged that after years of inflammatory rhetoric by Donald Trump, this was the moment that turned a protest into a riot.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Mr. Trump's lawyers insist it's absurd to blame him for the attack on the Capitol.
The article of impeachment now before the Senate is an unjust and blatantly unconstitutional act of political vengeance. This is ordinary political rhetoric that is virtually indistinguishable from the language that has been used by people across the political spectrum for hundreds of years.
This is a fight fighting, I say.
They mocked the idea that the word fight could be so dangerous, with a long video of Democrats using exactly the same word.
The fight of their lives.
We are in this fight for our lives.
We cannot ever give up fighting.
But Democrat prosecutors here are unrepentant in their caustic criticism of the former president.
And he has at every opportunity encouraged and cultivated actual violence by these groups. Yes, he has encouraged actual violence, not just the word fight.
Mr. Trump has been in Florida playing golf, but also following events as they unfold in the Senate. You can still see the scars of that mob attack here in Washington, D.C. This fence was hastily erected. It runs for several miles with razor wire on top and hundreds of troops on the other side, all here to defend the Capitol, the building that was attacked, but which now houses the senators who will cast their verdict on the future of Donald Trump. Very few expect him to be convicted. If he were, it would be extraordinary. America is waiting to see what happens next. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Washington.
Well, let's take a look at the other stories making the news this morning. And Mario Draghi has formally accepted the role of Italy's next Prime Minister. The former European Central Bank chief submitted the names of his cabinet yesterday, replacing Giuseppe Conte's centre-left coalition that collapsed last month. Thousands of doctors across the UK say they haven't been properly protected against COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. A poll by the British Medical Association found fewer than 28% of health professionals feel entirely safe at work. The association says the findings are unacceptable and tell a story of real worry amongst medics. The home of Everton manager Carlo Ancelotti has reportedly been raided by masked burglars. Police have confirmed 2 men wearing black balaclavas broke into a house in Crosby yesterday evening. It's believed the Italian's daughter was inside the property at the time. Police said a safe was taken, but the occupants weren't hurt. Addiction services are warning there's been a significant rise in the number of people getting help for drug and alcohol problems during this lockdown. Charity Action on Addiction say they've seen an 86% increase in the number of people seeking assistance for addiction issues compared to January last year. Ashna Huranag reports.
It's scary being in a locked space or, an enclosed space with someone that's struggling like that. Having someone that can fall down the stairs or has breathing issues, you're constantly scared that they're going to die.
Naomi's dad is alcohol and drug dependent. He has bounced between sobriety and traumatic behaviour her whole life. But this second national lockdown has exacerbated his addictions.
I mean, January, February for anyone with mental health issues is really hard anyway. And I think all the small things that gave shape to his life have now been stripped away. He had a relapse on 1st of Jan and it's kind of been ongoing since then, with hospital admissions and 2 hospital admissions, an overdose. And you just sort of can't see the end. I think it's the hopelessness of it and there's not an end point.
Addiction is an illness in isolation, and when the entire country is cocooned in lockdown, it gives the most perilous of issues space to thrive. A survey of the families of substance users shows that since the first lockdown, 85% of families have struggled more with helping their loved one. Almost half witnessed increased alcohol or drug use. Another charity says they've seen an 86% rise in the number of people seeking help this January compared to last.
Hello everyone.
But the help available looks very different.
Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to...
Practitioner Katie helps the families of people with drug and alcohol issues. The anonymity of joining virtual support groups can be comforting, but some are missing out.
We can't give the frontline care because we are unable to run the groups within lockdown. We can run them via Zoom sessions, but obviously it doesn't work in the same way. It doesn't have the same feeling for people. There's not that same level of support. We can't even offer somebody a cup of tea and a biscuit if they come to a support group, which is really key to making people feel welcome.
Charities are striving to do better, but resources are limited.
There is some help out there. I, of course, would say there's not enough. What we're doing at AdFam is campaigning and trying to fundraise so we can offer more and more help for these families. But it's still, I think we're on a journey and we still have a way to go.
Naomi's dad is currently in hospital recovering from his latest overdose. Whilst it's respite for her and her mum, they miss him dearly. For many, the end of lockdown means renewed freedoms, but for millions with dependency issues, it would also mean stopping this triggering period in its tracks. Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
And just a reminder, our series of special programmes, COVID Crisis, Learning the Lessons, where we delve into the data and main talking points from over the past year, is available to watch again throughout the day here on Sky News. Returning to the US now, and senators could vote later today on whether to convict or acquit Donald Trump in his impeachment trial over last month's Capitol riots. Let's speak to the associate editor of The Hill, Niall Stanage, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Good morning to you. What have you made of the management of the impeachment trial thus far?
I think Democrats have made a very effective case, Gillian. They spent approximately 3 days really setting out the context as they see it, Mr. Trump's history of inflammatory remarks, his remarks in particular at a speech on the day of the Capitol insurrection that they believe directly led and fueled those events. Mr. Trump's defence, honestly, has been a little bit more uncertain, particularly in the early stages, but it did do better. The defence team did do better earlier, well, about 12 hours ago, my time, in terms of trying to present some sort of justification.
Yes, and the defence claiming that this type of rhetoric has been used equally by the Democrats and their compilation of Democrats saying that they must fight for what they believe in. So they're suggesting that it isn't anyway abnormal that Donald Trump should have used language like that.
Yes, that's right. They're making the argument that it is basically standard political rhetoric to speak in this way. I think that that was more effective with some specific comments than others. There was, for example, a comment by Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic Speaker of the House of Representatives, seeming to welcome uprisings, or another Democratic Congresswoman talking approvingly of unrest in relation to issues of social justice here. But I think the point about fight was a bit thinner, honestly, because really it's Mr. Trump's history that plays into all this. A politician at random saying he or she should fight for a particular cause doesn't really seem the same thing as Mr. Trump's record to me.
Do you think that any Republicans will be persuaded by what they've heard so far to go against Donald Trump at this point?
At the moment, Gillian, I think the maximum you're going to get is 5 or 6 Republican senators out of 50. And I take that view because that's the number who voted at the outset of this trial to say that it was even constitutional. The vast bulk of Republican senators held to the view that it's not even constitutional to try the former president in this way. Now, among those 5 or 6, we have people who have shown a capacity and willingness to criticise Mr. Trump, people like Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. Those are the people who are most likely to cross party lines. Of course, that would not be enough to convict the former president.
And if he is cleared, is it a foregone conclusion that he will be able to run for political office again, should he so desire to do?
It is more or less, yes. I mean, basically, you need to be convicted before a separate measure can be brought barring you from federal office. The conviction, as many of your viewers will know, requires a 2/3 majority in the Senate. So it's highly unlikely that that first higher bar will be cleared to convict Trump, and therefore he would be willing or would be able to seek office again. I do think, though, in fairness, he has been politically damaged by the events that we have seen over the past couple of months and his role in them.
If he is cleared, it will leave many people questioning whether an impeachment should have been held at all. Do you think that it still has served a purpose, even if he is cleared?
I think it has. First of all, it clearly has not hurt Democrats. The polling that we see tends to show small majorities or pluralities in favour of convicting Donald Trump. So there's no real sense that the Democrats have overreached in that regard. And I do think that if he is acquitted, as is almost certain, it does still put a mark or asterisk against his name in the history books that he is the only president in American history to have been impeached twice, even though no president, including him, it looks like, has ever been convicted.
OK, well, thanks you very much for sharing your insight with us. Good to speak to you this morning.
Thanks, Gillian.
Time now for a look at the weather with Jo. Hi there.
Hello. It's looking a little bit different for next week. It's going to get milder, but we have still got a few wintry hazards to overcome this weekend. And it is going to feel bitterly cold, in fact, colder than it has done for quite a few days on account of the strong winds. Let's take a look at the details.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. So what we have is this cold air across the country. You might have noticed it. And then milder conditions trying to come in from the west. And those milder conditions are borne in on this rain and these freshening winds. So we've got gusts to around 60 miles per hour over some western areas this morning, but also strong gusts over eastern areas where temperatures once again are sub-zero and will barely rise above freezing through the day. So there's your wind chill factor. It will feel quite unpleasant even in those areas where you think you have some sunshine. The rain is already over parts of Ireland, and as it's run into this cold air, it's turned to snow on its leading edge. Not just snow, but we could see some freezing rain as well. Now, that's deeply unpleasant. It's where rain falls on frozen surfaces and freezes on contact, so very treacherous for motorcyclists, motorists and also pedestrians. Through the course of the day then, this tries to move its way eastwards. It makes very slow progress, a little bit of snow to come for parts of Wales and the southwest as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come, we have all of the sport with Jackie this morning. Hello there.
Good morning, Gillian. England's cricketers have made a very strong start to the second test against India in Chennai. We've got all the action coming up, all those wickets. Also, we will show you who came out on top in the Manchester Derby with a big result in the race for the Women's Super League title. And will England respond to defeat in their Six Nations opener with victory today? We're going to be hearing from the England camp and the Scotland camp as well.
I don't know if I'd say it was love at first FaceTime. He was actually an hour late for our first virtual date, but it did get better, and we ended up talking until 3 a.m. that night, and then we basically just carried on having loads of FaceTimes, messages for 3 weeks, and yeah, I think I did. It sounds really cheesy, but I think I had fallen in love with him on paper or over FaceTime before I'd even met him. Finally, we were able to meet at social distance last summer after like all these virtual dates. And yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but as soon as I saw him, I just felt completely comfortable with him and completely like, yeah, this is the one. What makes any of us fall in love at any point is, I think it's like 100,000 different things, isn't it? It's like it wasn't the way he looked or any particular thing he said. It was just a chemistry. It was just a spark between us, and then it was just confirmed basically when we did finally meet up. I think we both just felt like, yeah, this was real. It wasn't just a FaceTime fantasy. We were just sat by a riverbank and we were just eating crisps, and he said, "Oh, Lorna, will you marry me?" And I was like, "Yeah, definitely." But it was honestly like, when I was trying to explain it to friends and family the next day, like I didn't really mean to get engaged. It was more like if he'd asked me if I wanted a cup of tea or to stroke a cat or something, like the answer's always going to be yes. Oh, here he comes now. He's trying to join me now. I know it sounds ridiculous. It really felt like the most normal thing in the world, and I think it's caused a bit of a fuss really. That you realise in retrospect, actually, it does seem insane, doesn't it?
Yes.
Time for a look at the sport coming up with Jackie and all the very latest with the cricket. Hi there.
Yes, morning, Gillian. It's actually lovely to wake up to some sport actually going on, and it has been a good start to the second test for England. There have been wickets. Let's have a look.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
The world is changing, and I'm really afraid that being selfish can be our worst mistake, and I cannot allow that. When you think that you are not able to provide food to your family, I think that's the worst feeling that someone has.
Wolves manager Nuno Espirito Santo, like all of us, has been profoundly affected by the pandemic. He wanted to help and approached the club's foundation with his offer. The result is a £250,000 donation to Feed the Pack, a project aimed at reducing food poverty in a city where 29% of children are living in poverty.
It's a common project now. It's everybody that wants to help, everybody in Wolves that can give a hand, he will do so. It's just a beginning.
It was great that he decided that he wanted to support a project and support the city ultimately. We initially explored a few ideas about the type of projects that we could work together on, and we kept coming back to the need for supporting people with food at this most difficult time. So in the end, it was so sort of emotive, the whole topic, that it was the one that we chose out of all the other options.
What do you want to achieve from the project, and what do you think it can achieve?
I think it can involve many people. It can involve everyone, companies, individual, and it can bring a spirit that we need to support each other now as a pack. And when I speak about pack, it's not only our fans, it's the city.
Football has played on through lockdowns, but Nuno and his staff have not been desensitised to society's problems.
Not having fans here, not having that presence, it's a big blow. It's a big blow, but it's not so big as we are experiencing besides football. The society and the world is on problems. We can see you just turn on the news and you get frightened. So, and with all these doubts in the future of the people, it's a moment that shows that that's a light. We're gonna go through this. We just need to stick together, to stay close to each other, to not being selfish. This is not the right moment to think about individuals, to think about as a whole, is to think about which future we want for the further generations in front of us. This pandemic will leave big scars in our lives, and let's try to make it easier for everybody.
Do you think what you're doing now and what the Feed the Pack project will do is give people a sense of community that may not have had it before as well? When people go through abject poverty, they may feel alone.
Exactly that. Let's not allow them to feel alone. Let's give them the sense and the feeling that they have someone, and us as a club, as a foundation, it's the right moment to do it.
It was tough, it was brave, I didn't quite understand at that time what was happening, because, he was kneeling during the national anthem. So part of me, I thought that was disrespectful, but then I looked into the bigger picture of why he was kneeling, for police brutality and inequality, and for someone to put his whole life on the line for the better of the people, it's just inspiration at a time when doing that was one of the worst possible times to do it.
When there's significant change and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, I'll stand.
He probably had death threats, probably had, you know, his life was probably hell. And for him to do that when it wasn't fashionable to do it and just do it for the right reasons, I can't have no more respect for him. That wouldn't happen in this country, not a chance. Would I put my whole career on the line for the greater good at that time without having to think about it? Probably not. So for him to do that, it's just inspirational character, really is. Everyone's talking about this, Black Lives Matter and this, that and the other, but people are talking about it now because it's fashionable. Like, to do that, to get on your knee when, and I know there was a couple other players at the time, but for him to do that by himself, like, he's just, I can't put into words the amount of respect I have for him.
And you just said there, people are talking about the Black Lives Matter movement because it's fashionable. Does that anger you? Does that please you? Does that make you feel better, that there's greater awareness? What are your emotions?
Players are kneeling for equality, and that's it.
A powerful image to show football's social conscience as all of the players take the knee.
Whether
committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
This is Sky News Breakfast. Coming up. The singer who overcame a speech impediment to follow his dream will be singing at Twickenham later on today. Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Our top stories this morning. The government has launched a new campaign to reach those at risk groups who may not yet have taken up the offer to get a COVID-19 vaccine. It comes as ministers make a final push to hit Monday's vaccine target of offering the jab to 15 million people. Donald Trump's defence team in his second impeachment trial have accused the Democrats of waging a campaign of hatred against him. US senators could vote later today on whether to convict or acquit Donald Trump in his impeachment trial over last month's Capitol riots. And there's a warning from addiction services that the number of people seeking help for drug and alcohol problems is rising during the latest lockdown. The wedding industry is calling on the government to include it in the roadmap out of lockdown that will be announced by the Prime Minister on the 22nd of February. Around 200,000 weddings from last year still haven't happened, and the industry is warning that they need targeted financial support and a clear route forward. Aisha Zahid has this story.
Liz normally does 50 weddings a year, but in 2020, only 5 went ahead. The pandemic has left her with less than 10% of her annual income.
I'm doing all I can to keep my business here and keep it alive, because I've got couples that are waiting for me to be able to do their weddings later this year. But it's expensive, paying out each month for things that I can't use and I'm not likely to use for a while.
Critics say there hasn't been enough support from the government.
It's an industry worth more than £14 billion, and the pandemic has left many businesses within it struggling. With more than 500,000 weddings in the pipeline for this year, the continued uncertainty ahead is a big concern for many.
And a number of those working in the sector are calling for weddings to be recognised in the roadmap out of lockdown.
The wedding industry needs a clear plan as to when we can open and to how many guests. And we need support. We have been unable to trade in a commercially viable form for nearly a year. And the infrastructure at the very heart of our sector is due to collapse.
Holly and Chris exchanged their vows in a ceremony last October, but only 15 people were legally allowed to attend. They hope to put on a bigger event this summer, but have been forced to postpone it until next year.
It's been really hard. I mean, luckily we've had a good distraction with Rosie, but it has been really difficult.
For businesses and couples alike, hopes now lie on the current restrictions being reviewed. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
The England rugby team play Italy in the Six Nations later on today. Rodney Earl-Clark will open the match with the national anthem. The singer overcame a speech impediment to reach this point in his career and helps others to overcome similar challenges. Before we speak to him, let's take a listen to his latest single. Rodney Earl-Clark joins us now. Good morning to you. How are you feeling before your big debut in front of an audience of millions?
Good morning, Gillian. Thanks very much for having me on your show. I've got to be honest with you. I didn't get much sleep last night with all the excitement, but I'm sure that it's going to be a wonderful day.
A little bit nervous then, but I mean, you shouldn't be fazed. You've performed at the Royal Festival Hall, you've performed with people like Michael Ball. You've got quite a lot of experience to your credit.
That's right. I've been able to perform for many years in some wonderful places, but of course, with the lockdown, you know, we're all a bit out of practice, and I've got to say to my fellow colleagues out there, I really do appreciate how tough it has been and how lucky and fortunate I am indeed to be able to perform during these circumstances.
Yes, and as you say, many of your colleagues not able to perform during lockdown. What are some of the things that you've been doing? Have you gone for an online audience, or what have you been doing to get through this time?
Yes, well, apart from the initial lockdown where I kind of tried my hand at DIY, as I'm sure quite a lot of us did, I really set about trying to kind of reflect as to why I do what I do. And of course, sharing my experiences and my expertise online.
And it's quite remarkable because you've overcome a speech impediment for you to be performing at this level. Tell us about that and how you overcame it.
Yes, well, I've been stuttering from the age of 12, and I never really much kind of had the opportunity, or indeed felt the opportunity, to express myself and communicate properly, or as how I wanted to. But I noticed a drastic change in the way I spoke when I attended the Royal Academy of Music, studying singing there. And it became really apparent to me that through that course, I learned how to breathe properly, how to breathe like an opera singer. And those breathing techniques really helped me to iron out the bumps in my speech. And with this in mind, I kind of really thought that it was a marvelous opportunity for me to try and help others in doing the same. And I've organised and devised an online course called Singing Speaking to help people with their fluency.
Now, are you a rugby fan?
I do appreciate rugby. It's an amazing spectator sport. And I'll tell you a little secret. I used to play rugby at school, and my mother always used to laugh at how clean my rugby kit was when I brought it home, because obviously
That means you weren't very good.
No, I was a centre and I was very fast.
So they couldn't catch you. Now, I'm going to be a bit cheeky. Can you give us a bit of a blast this morning? I know you probably haven't warmed up yet, of what people can expect later.
Well, I'm always of the opinion that, I want to save a bit. And, I didn't get much sleep last night, and I don't want to disappoint, but I really want to encourage people to tune in and to really see me singing the national anthem. So on this occasion, I'm actually going to save my voice.
Oh, you're teasing us. Rodney L. Clark, you've whetted the appetite. We shall be keenly listening later on. Good luck. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you so much. Take care.
OK, from one musician to another. She's a bit of a dab hand at the piano, aren't you?
It's rumoured, so it's said. That's all because of the lockdown weather in front of my piano. Anyway, to the weather, which is really quite important this weekend because it's all change. Time to say goodbye to the wintry conditions, not just yet, wait for it, but by Monday we could well be seeing temperatures in double figures. Let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, the situation this weekend is that we've got cold air over the country. You may well have noticed it. And now we've got milder conditions trying to come in. But of course, as this rain makes its way off the Atlantic, it's turning to sleet, snow and freezing rain on its leading edge. And so we do have warning out again for the sleet, the snow, the frost, the ice, because temperatures once again are sub-zero to start the day. Not as cold as they have been, but still saw minus 12 over Scotland. So through the course of the day, the central and eastern areas likely to see some sunshine, but daytime temperatures only around 0 or 1. And to go with that, we've got a very strong wind, that wind gusting 45 to 50 miles per hour over those eastern coasts. So a significant wind chill factor. A similar situation in the west. In fact, the winds are stronger, gusting to around 60 miles per hour. But we're starting to see this milder air coming in. 3 or 4 for those eastern parts and 11 down in the southwest. So that's 52 degrees Fahrenheit. But certainly Northern Ireland, like to see some blizzard conditions today with those strong winds and that rain turning to snow on its leading edge. We'll also see some winteriness across parts of Wales and the southwest. Could see some freezing rain, which is quite unusual. It's rain that freezes on contact with frozen surfaces. Very, very dodgy in terms of travelling. But a lot of that dies out as we go through the day. Further wet weather to the northwest overnight. Another cold one to come for many. Showers and longer spells of rain pushing eastwards, and eventually that milder air arrives.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's 7:43, you're watching Sky News Breakfast. After the break, we'll take a look at the newspapers and the stories making the front pages. Do stay with us.
For the early risers.
As we examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers. The curious and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to Sophie Ridge on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. We help you understand the world with us. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News.
It's a life skill, and in this country, we've made a very sensible decision that every child should learn how to swim. And of course, during this past year, it's really been disrupted, and there have been very, very few swimming lessons. And when the swimming pools opened, there were more than 10% of swimming pools that didn't open. And there's great concern that many of those pools will not open ever again. And so, for this generation of young people, they've got parents have got a real dilemma, because a lot of the pools prior to the COVID had a 3-year waiting list on their swimming program. So it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out that there are going to be a lot of kids that will not be able to learn how to swim unless we can get those pools open and fully operational as quickly as possible.
Welcome back. With us this morning to take us through the newspapers, the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha and the comedian Andrew Doyle. Morning again to you both. Starting with the I front page. And Andrew, you've had a look at this story. Really the question that everyone's asking, when are we going to be out of lockdown? And, what will the roadmap be out of our restrictions?
That's right. And finally, Downing Street have outlined a kind of what they're calling a roadmap for us to get out of lockdown. Boris Johnson's described this as a 3-stage plan. So what would happen is he's hoping that by the Easter weekend, by April, the pubs will be open again and you'll start seeing the hospitality industry coming back to life. By the 8th of March, then he's talking about reopening of schools. That's when that's scheduled for. And then at that point, they would assess the R number. And as we all know, the key R number is the rate of infection. That has to be under 1. Actually, yesterday was the first time since July that the R number had gone below 1. But that's what they would be looking for on the 8th of March as the schools are scheduled to reopen. If it is below 1, then they can proceed to the next stage and they would give the green light for non-essential shops to be opening by the end of March. So I think this roadmap idea is really, really important because ultimately the economy is taking such a big hit. Businesses, shops, teachers and parents, everyone needs to know or have some sense at least of when all these restrictions can be lifted, not least because people need hope that this is not going to be something that's going on interminably. I should say that the government's roadmap is a best case scenario. So Boris Johnson has said that it's very unlikely that, for instance, travel to foreign countries will be open for many, many months to come. But this is a really good step forward, I think. No one's denying the seriousness of the virus, but we also have to be clear that there are very serious costs to restrictions on the liberty of citizens. And we've tried the new normal. We do have to get back to the normal.
Yes, sounding very positive, especially with the R rate being under 1 for the first time since July. But the Mail saying, Badisha, that we shouldn't bank on freedom in time for Easter.
Yes, this follows on completely from what Andrew was saying, and the Mail also referred to this roadmap. In fact, we know that Boris Johnson is usually an ebullient, optimistic type, but this intervention has really come from the government's own scientists, who are pointing out that despite coming out of the gate really early on the vaccines, we still need to get these very high infection numbers coming down, and to realize that for every household to get the 2 doses of the vaccine that they need will really see us into autumn. So instead of trying to book summer holidays or Easter holidays, I mean, remember that even Germany today, very recently in the last couple of days, has put travel restrictions on neighbouring countries' citizens travelling in. So these are still very, very hot issues. We are not really in a steep decline of the latest wave of COVID. So they're warning that we shouldn't really make plans. Of course, I agree completely with Andrew that this lockdown, this pandemic, this quarantine, whatever you want to call it, normal life for most people stopped around the 13th of March last year. So we're really nearly approaching the 1-year anniversary of this strange, unnatural way that we've all been living. But it's also true that if you look at the reality of the numbers of infections and deaths, and you look at how far in we've got to that full course of vaccinations, we're not quite where we need to be yet. What's interesting is that Boris Johnson is clearly listening to the science. A lot of his bluster has gone. A lot of his sort of, don't worry about it, it's all going to be okay, snappiness has gone. And he's been really quite sober, indeed somewhat invisible, I'd say, over the last 2 weeks. But the overall message is don't look to Easter or summer. Try to think of embracing what I'm calling autumn term, that period after the summer holidays. Look ahead to then.
OK, let's move away from the pandemic with this story, Andrew, about a teacher forced out of her job by pushy parents, the story says.
Yes, this is Sue Allington, who's a teacher at Rose Hill School in Tunbridge Wells, which is a prestigious prep school. And she was dismissed because parents put in complaints that she wasn't sufficiently qualified. She's actually been awarded £140,000 in this tribunal, and rightly so. Now, Sue Allington was considered an excellent teacher across the board. There were no problems at all. But simply because the parents in question had said she didn't have the formal qualification. She didn't have a formal teacher training degree. So she had A-levels and no more. But she started work at a time when that was a possible career route. So she started as a games teacher and moved into the academic aspect of school life. So this is just, frankly, parents behaving like Jobsworths. This is just bureaucracy. These parents had even sent her thank you notes because she was such a good teacher. So this is absolutely preposterous, frankly. And then the headmistress had told her she'd have to become a TA, a teaching assistant, and take a massive pay cut. And she challenged this. And it's good that justice has been served here. I should point out, I've done teacher training. I used to be a teacher. I hate to break it to you. Teacher training degrees are just jumping through hoops. You learn how to be a good teacher on the job. And frankly, private schools should just tell pushy parents to back off because they get involved when they shouldn't. They don't know anything about education. And frankly, heads should just be sticking by their teachers. These are unreasonable complaints.
Thank you. I see you feel quite strongly on that one. Vested interest there. Badisha, this story about the kids' company boss and a judge rejecting a bid to disqualify.
Yeah, this is actually another story of unjustified complaints and a good woman vindicated. You might remember Kids Company a few years ago really being a beacon when it comes to reaching out to those who are excluded, very, very vulnerable young people who'd had very tough lives. Kids Company was brought down by unsubstantiated sexual abuse and financial mismanagement claims. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because after 3.5-year legal battle, the woman who was the founder of Kids Company, Camila Batmangelic, who was a real heroine in public life. And 7 trustees have finally been completely exonerated. It's so important now because what COVID has done is increase social inequality and poverty and make circumstances much, much worse for those who are socially excluded, as indeed Marcus Rashford's campaigning has pointed out. We need charities like Kids Company more than ever to reach those who are unreachable, who've fallen through the cracks, who can't get the help and the support that they need. And that's why I'm so delighted. I just wanted to bring this up because 3.5-year legal battle, of course, it fell off the front pages, but we need organisations like Kids Company and children's charities more than ever at this time.
Complete gear change now. Tell us about the dog stranded in Mexico, Andrew.
I like this story because when it comes to tenuous Star Wars connections, you've got to hand it to the son. This is a dog that is called Chewbacca. It's a 9-month-old Shih Tzu. It's absolutely beautiful. You can see the picture of it there. And of course, the article is based on the concept that it resembles Chewbacca from Star Wars. And you can see a picture of Chewbacca there. This poor dog was stranded in Mexico because they'd lost the pet passport. I wasn't even sure that these things existed, but apparently that it's a married couple, both called Karen and Karen. So that's a bit confusing. But Karen, as in the female of the partners, stayed behind in Mexico because she was trying to find the pet passport. And the poor little dog, Chewy, was left out there. And there's been a big hoo-ha. And finally, Chewbacca is able to come back to the UK. So it's a triumph. But let's face it, the only reason this is being reported is because there's a slight connection with Star Wars.
OK, Chewy's on his way home. Just very quickly, Valentine's Day tomorrow. This is the ultimate story in recycling. Vidisha?
It's super duper cute. So Tom McAllister, who was a sailor, he met his lovely wife, Jean, wife of 61 years, many, many moons ago, and he presented her back then with a Valentine's card. He preserved it lovingly, and every Valentine's Day, it reappears on the mantelpiece wherever they are living at the time. Jean herself has said, our kids think it's daft, but I love him to bits for it.
Oh,
so,
bless him. I'm sure it means the same every single year. Vidisha and Andrew, see you in the next hour. Good to see you.